the hallway. Will you turn off the center light, Connor? They're labeled. There you go. All right, so let's blue. I thank you, sir. All right. So, I've seen this map already, and we're roughly up here. All right, let's go look at a different one. Again, this was the map from a couple weeks ago. We got the Dead Sea, and we're going to be on the northeast section, north of the Arnon River. That's where we're camped at when we're picking up in Deuteronomy Chapter 3. All right, so this was a map that I'd been trying to find something similar, and I'll post the links on these online afterwards, but it shows the names of the groups that were there before Israel came at all. So starting from the south, you've got Edom, and that's who they walked around. You've got Moab. They also walked around until they crossed over the Arnon River, and that's when they got into the land of Sion. They were not permitted to attack Ammon, right? Both Ammon and Moab were the descendants from Abraham's nephew, Lot, right? And so those lands were reserved to them by God. But Sion, who was an Amorite, who had come over and taken that land away from Moab and Ammon in a previous kingdom, he fought Israel and lost all of his territory. That's what happened at the end of Deuteronomy 2. What we're going to get to in chapter 3 is this big region up here, generally named Bashan, and there's a king over that whose name was Og, and this dude was a big fella. We know he's a big fella because they had a relic of his bed. It was made of iron, and it was 13.5 feet long. It was twice the length of a modern-day king-size bed. A little bit wider. It was like 6.5 feet. Modern king's about 6, but twice the length from head to foot. So tall. He was one of the last, giants in the land. But he controlled all this area, and so the really kind of distinction between these two is rivers. Sion was the Arnon River up to about the Jabbok River, which curves around over here into Ammon's land. And then north of that gets into Bashan, and it traveled all the way up to Mount Hermon, which isn't listed on this particular map. So these are the groups that were present before Israel came along at all. So since they've come along, and this is, again, we're looking backwards. This is stuff that's already happened in our chronology. Sion has already been conquered, and Bashan's already been conquered. It happened back in Numbers. But now, as we're getting into the last, 2 months of Moses' life, last 1 month of Moses' life, he is telling the generation there that's alive before they invade Canaan over here what all's happened, given the recap, even if it was relatively recent, which the conquering of Sion was. And so he's getting in that recap up to what happens here in this region of Bashan.
So what country's right below Canaan?
That would be the wilderness that leads to Egypt.
That's the wilderness.
Yep.
Wander. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And this little chunk down here is that little finger of the Red Sea.
Why could they not go in from south?
That was where they were told to go in 38 years ago.
That's where they did. Okay.
And so the Lord is bringing them in by a different direction.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, no problem. Any other questions?
Do more cities show up?
They do not, but I do have another map with more cities on it. So I felt like the color was easier to see the territories, but this is the same information But in here you can see Kadesh Barnea, and then going around Edom, around Moab, and then right here is the Arnon River, Kingdom of Sion, and his capital city was Heshbon. All right. Yeah.
Lot had two sons?
He did. He did.
That's really good, too.
That's right. And so, at the time, Moses has gotten up to his recap of the story. This portion, adjacent to Ammon and just north of Moab, has already been conquered in the story, and he's going to tell them, here's what happened next when you're going to conquer the kingdom of Og of Bashan. And so that territory would actually extend all the way down here.
You can see it better on color.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, but you have some more cities, and that will show up in a minute. So we might bounce through this and see what other. So this one added a rough estimate of the travel. So you've got going around of Moab. I think that the green line probably should be farther off because they came in from Moab from the wilderness side. But there's going to be, battles here, and then the main battle in chapter 3 is going to take place at a place called Andrea, and that's right here. This big lake up here is referred to as the Sea of Chinneroth. In the New Testament, we know that as the Sea of Galilee. Okay. This big region in between, there's a lot of mountainous terrain there, which Gilead means rocky place. Let's see. This map has the separation between the tribes after they've conquered both, and Moses has delegated it to Reuben and Gad, and then half of the tribe of Manasseh is going to take this portion of Bashan and Gilead. So Gilead, this mountainous region, I think I got a better map that shows it. Yeah, so you can see the mountains in here. From the Jabbok River south is what Gad will get, and Gilead north is what the half-tribe of Manasseh will get. So that's just generally where we're at, and we'll talk a lot more in detail as we go through, but I wanted you to at least have a visual for where are we at on the map. So they've conquered that southern portion between the Arnon River, all right, which was the border down to Moab, and then they've conquered the whole territory that Sion controlled. And so now we're going north up the way of Bashan. We talked about ways. Way just means path or route, and generally when the scripture's describing the route, it will tell you what's at the other end of it. So the way to Bashan, you're on the road heading towards this big region up here of Bashan. Let's see if I can get my definition. Bashan means fruitful. There's going to be a lot of names and territories and regions mentioned in this chapter. There's really only two that you need to know. One is Bashan and the other is Gilead. The reason is most very specific locations in this chapter aren't mentioned outside of these particular events and connected with the conquering of Og. However, Bashan and Gilead both show up a bunch in the other parts of Scripture. Bashan is used even in the poetry sections. So in Psalms 22 and 12, which describing Jesus' crucifixion, there's an expression in there about he is encompassed by the bulls of Bashan. Yeah. So if you've got really good pasture land, Brother Parrish, what kind of bulls do you have?
Perfect.
Strong, big, healthy, right? The best of the best, right? That's the word picture that's being given, is that these very strong bulls, very dangerous enemies. And so there are some words that are associated with Bashan throughout Scripture. It shows up 60 times, okay? 60 times that Bashan shows up, often as a geographic reference alone. Sometimes it clarifies which portion of Manasseh is being referenced, because the tribe of Manasseh is going to get two sections, one on the east of Jordan, which is what we're looking at, and one on the west side of Jordan, inside Canaan. And so sometimes it will say Manasseh of Bashan, and so you can know, okay, we're over here. Let's see, sometimes it will clarify a city. So if you've got cities with more than one name, it gives you the region too. And so if you've got Golan of Bashan, then that's the city of Golan that's going to be over here in this region. Symbolically, it's often associated with either bulls or hills or oaks. So, Lebanon is associated with real strong, beautiful cedar trees. Well, there's a corollary there with Bashan and strong, beautiful oaks. See, Ezekiel 27:6 said that some particular ores were made from the oaks of Bashan. And so when Amos is addressing some group of people in Amos 4:1, he basically calls them a bunch of cows, heifers from, I think it's kinds, from Bashan. And so there's figurative language associated with this, but to understand that, you need to know this is a very good pasture land, good for cattle. The things that grow there are very fruitful, and so it's a very positive association with the good itself naturally. You have to read for context to see, is that good thing really a good thing in the context, or is it something that you would perceive maybe the world would say is good because it's got the best of the world, but whatever's going on, they may have been disobeying God. But all that being said is that Bashan is an important geographic marker to know. Right? There's more geography than you can hold on to in your head as you're going through this. Bashan is one that you can go ahead and note down. This is one I need to store. And so just generally, let's go back to that region up there, roughly east of the Sea of Galilee, is roughly what we're talking about. As you get closer in here to the mountains, to the south, that's going to be Gilead, okay, which is our other term. So, Gilead means a rocky region. It shows up 114 times. Now, just to keep it confusing, sometimes Gilead is referring to that region, right? Those particular section of rocks. That's probably what was referenced when Jacob fled from Laban. You know where Laban caught up with him? At Gilead. Yep. Do you know where the Ishmaelites who bought Joseph had come from? Context clues would tell you if he's asking, it's probably Gilead, right? Yeah. They came, the Ishmaelites were on their way from Gilead, so they'd come from this rocky, mountainous range just to the east of the Jordan River. So over here on this other mountain range is where you've got Jerusalem and the other cities that are going to be inside Canaan. Then you've got the Jordan River and the flat land in between, and then Gilead is the mountain range on the other side. Okay. Now, just to keep things confusing, there are people named Gilead. There are people that are named Gilead who will possess the land of Gilead, even though it seems like they were named Gilead before they brought to Gilead, so they weren't named, so the region wasn't named for them. Okay? Let's see if I can get this straight. So Joseph had a son named Manasseh, and he had a son named Machir, and he had a son named Gilead. In Genesis 50 and 23, we learn that Joseph got to bounce on his knees his grandson's children, his grandson Machir's children. So Gilead was in Egypt bouncing on Joseph's knees. Okay, so that's well before coming to the land, conquering the land, and being the recipient of it. And so when you get down to verse 15, where Moses said, I gave Gilead unto Machir, which is Gilead's father, we're not talking about the literal man. We're talking about his family. Okay? Because that was Joseph's grandson, a couple hundred years ago. All right? So in Genesis 50 and 23 is where we find that Joseph 50, the very end, right? Before Joseph dies at 110. But in Deuteronomy 3, when we're explaining about Gilead and who it's given to this chunk of Manasseh's family. Okay, because Manasseh had a bunch of descendants, and so the portion was given to Machir's descendants, and Gilead was his kind of next one. All right, so those are the two big territories that I want you to hold on to. Bashan and Gilead, and recognizing that when we see Gilead, we've got to approach it with caution of, all right, are we talking about an individual? Are we talking about a land? Are we talking about people who live in a land? Are we talking about descendants of an individual named Gilead? There's a lot of options, and so we have to read carefully. I believe there is a Mount Gilead, which is referring to this whole mountain chain. That shows up on the... Cool. All right. So let's look at the text with that kind of long introduction. So then we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and King Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us. He and all his people came to battle at Andrea. All right, so up here they've got Andrea on the Yarmuk River, out here farther east. So the camp was probably still back down here on the plain of Moab in Sion's territory. And so you would imagine the warriors are going up to meet them. This is different than what happened with the other king, right? They asked for permission to come through. And even though God said, I'm going to deliver him into your hands, and that guy didn't grant the request to pass through, he came out and fought them. And so this guy, they didn't even ask because the Lord had told them that's what was going to happen next. The Lord said unto me, fear him not. Who's the him? King Og. King Og, who's got the 13-foot-long bed. All right, so if I stand on this stool, that'd be a bad idea, right? I'll probably still be shorter than him. Okay, big dude. The Lord said, fear him not, for I will deliver him and all of his people and his land into thy hand, and thou shalt do unto him as thou didst unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. Right, so that city down in the south, they'd already destroyed them completely, conquered all their cities. There was no survivors. They only kept the cattle alive. He says, you're going to do the same thing. The Lord's going to give them into your hand. And so verse 3 just kind of sums it up with that God promised us in verse 3. So the Lord our God delivered him into our hands, right? Delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we smote him until nothing left to him remaining. There was left nothing, all right? There was not a single person that got away. And again, we talked last time about why God is exterminating these people, and this was the judgment that was being brought against them, which is what had been told to Abraham, is that his people were going to inherit this land, but it wasn't yet, for the time of the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet come, or full circle, or ripe. And so he is bringing down the judgment for their idolatry and for their wickedness. So we took all of his cities at that time. There was not a city which we took not from them. 70 cities. Patrick, how many is 70? Score is 20, so 20 times 3, 60. Is that a bunch of cities? Were these like wimpy cities? No. No, it says all these cities were fenced with high walls, gates, and bars, besides many unwalled towns, a great many. Like, we didn't even count those. So 60 walled cities. All right, is it easy to conquer a walled city with gates and bars, right? The bars are the things that keep the gates closed. But the Lord was delivering them into their hands, and so they won 100%. And we utterly destroyed them, as we did Sihon, king of Heshbon, utterly destroying the men, the women, the children of every city. But all the cattle and the spoil of the cities we took for the prey to ourselves. So all the gold and goods and whatnot they kept. All right. So then it recaps. We took at that time, out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites, both Sihon and Og, the land that was on this side of Jordan, from the river Arnon, so down here at the border with Moab, all the way north unto Mount Hermon. So let's see if we can't find a map that shows where Mount Hermon's at. There's one. Way up there, Mount Hermon. Okay, that was the region that they conquered in these two very short campaigns where the enemy brought their entire army to bear and they were decimated just completely, and then they did mop up of all the cities. All right. Hermon, Mount Hermon, that's another location you should know. It doesn't show up near as frequently, but this particular verse gives you some clues about other names that it used to be called. So Hermon unto the Sidonians was called Sirion, and the Amorites called it Shinar. All right, let's see if we can find my note on that one. Mount Hermon. This is often associated with the northern boundary, the northern point. And so there's only 13 references to it. But once in Psalm 89:12, it is describing the expanse. God, from the south to the north, from Mount Tabor to Mount Hermon, everybody in between is going to be rejoicing. Psalm 133:3 talks about the dew of Hermon as the dew falling on Mount Zion. And then in Song of Solomon, he is talking to his beautiful one, his lover, and says, "Come from Lebanon and come to the top of the mountain of Mount Hermon from Mount Shinar." And so you've got both Shinar and Hermon there. If you didn't have this verse, you'd think it's two different things, but we're describing the same location that he's using that in that poetical language. So Mount Hermon is another definite landmark, along with the rivers, where you can kind of zero in on where we're talking about. Any other questions? Any questions about that thus far? All right. So he's saying what all we've conquered in these two campaigns, down from the river Arnon all the way north to Hermon, all the cities of the plain. All right, when we talk about the plain, we're talking about the Jordan River plain, right? That flat land in between those two mountain chains. So there are cities there. We've conquered all those and Gilead. All right, so looking left to right, the plain, then Gilead, right, the mountainous region, and then the Bashan, this big pasture land. All right, it's not hilly, so good, strong cattle grow there. And it gives a couple of the names of the cities, such as Salchak and Andrea, cities of the kingdom of Og of Bashan. Andrea, that's only mentioned 8 times. It was just a particular city in Og's kingdom. It meant a goodly pasture. Right? It was one of the principal cities of the kingdom, but all right. For verse 11, only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rehoboth of the children of Ammon? So this particular souvenir made its way down into the nation of Ammon, and that's where it was hung on to. and it was 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in breadth. And so a cubit is roughly 18 inches. And so you multiply those by 1.5. That's how you get your 13 and a half feet long bed. Big dude.
I did the math.
And where's the big little stick?
Right. There was a royal cubit, which was 24 inches, and that would make him much taller. But that was in connection with the temple. All right. And this land, which we possessed at that time from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon, and half Mount Gilead, unto the cities thereof, I gave unto the Reubenites and the Gadites. So he's saying, from down here, this city, Aroer, on the river Arnon, so starting there and traveling north up to a halfway chunk of Gilead, I took that section, gave it to both Gad and Reuben. How did they split up Gilead? It may have been the Jabbok River, which flows through. I'm not exactly sure, but we do know that there's a chunk of the Gilead that was in the south. So you will have folks living in Gilead who are Gadites. It could also be described Gileadites. And you could also have folks in the northern portion of Gilead who are the tribe of Manasseh. Okay? All right. So, and the rest of Gilead, so that was the southern portion, the rest of Gilead and of Bashan, right, so the northern portion, I gave unto the half tribe of Manasseh. All the region of Argob, that's like a sub-region within Bashan. I don't have a lot of information on how to zero it in any farther. It's only mentioned 4 times, so I wouldn't worry about that one. Which was called the land of the giants. All right, one more little fun detail, because we talked about you could have Gadites who are in Gilead. You could have folks from Manasseh who are in Gilead. There's also this joker, Jair, the son of Manasseh, that took all the country of Argob from the coast of Jeshurun to Maturathai, and called them after his own name, Bashan, Hoveth, Jair, unto this day. Jair was not a direct son of Manasseh. And I probably spent way too much time trying to figure this out today. So we talked about Machir. He had sons, and that's who your descendants of Gilead by name come from. But he also had a daughter, and the daughter married into a fella by the name of Hezron as a second wife. Not polygamy, the first wife had already died. Hezron is the grandson of Judah. Judah, Pharez, Hezron. Hezron is in Jesus' lineage. Okay? Because if you go to Hezron's first wife and his children there, you'll find a guy named Ram, Aminadab, Nahshon, Solomon, Boaz. Okay? So Salmon and Jair, while they'd be of radically different generations from connection back to Hezron, they existed at the same time, right? Salmon's father, Nahshon, was a prince at the time the tabernacle was built in the wilderness, and so he obviously had to die off. And so his son, Salmon, marries a girl from Jericho named Rahab. So he's obviously alive at this time, and he's going to have a role in playing this battle when you go into the land with Joshua. Well, Jair, let's see, their connection. Salmon's great-grandfather and Jair's grandfather were half-brothers. All right? It's like Nashville, Ken, right? All right? So Jair is technically of the tribe of Judah. But because his grandmother was the daughter of Machir, and he kicked some tail in this battle, he conquered all of these villages, none of the big cities, but all these villages were associated with him, and he named them after himself. And so Havoth Jair means villages of Jair, Jair's villages. And so within Gilead, I say all this just so you can understand that within the region of Gilead, you can be talking about Gadites of Gilead, Manassites of Gilead, a Reuben descendant, Judah's descendant through this Jair, who's tangentially connected on his mama's side.
And how is he connected to Manasseh? You know, got lost.
So Manasseh's son, Machir, had a daughter, and she married Hezron as a second wife when he was in his 60s.
His grandmother?
It's his, Jair's grandmother was the daughter of Machir. And you don't really, I'm not, it's not going to be a quiz on this, but just recognizing, I've always been confused as I'm reading through references to Gilead because it doesn't feel sharp like I'm just talking about one group. And it turns out you're not. And so you've got to really look for context clues of which group or region. And it could just be, some folks who are after that guy who was named Gilead. And so it can be a little confusing. So you got some group from Judah, Manasseh, and Gad, all in the same kind of mountainous region. All right, is that clear as mud? All right, so Jair, son of Manasseh, right? He's a grandson, great, but through his daughter, through his son's daughter. So he took those villages, and then it said, I gave Gilead unto Machir. All right, again, Machir's dead at this point. We're talking about the descendants of that portion of Manasseh's family, right? All of these tribes, when you're up at the Joseph brother level, those guys are all dead, and sometimes the families are described based on those the sons of the brothers who are all dead too. But that's how they refer to them in bulk, because this is large numbers. You're talking 600,000 soldiers, men, and so you've got somewhere between 20 and 70,000 in men. So we're talking about bodies of men based on a common ancestor. All right, and this may all be painfully easy and obvious to you, but I figure it's better to clarify. All right. Verse 16, unto the Reubenites and unto the Gadites I gave from Gilead. All right, northern Gilead or South Gilead? That's right, South Gilead. All right, Reuben and Gad, they had the southern chunk of Gilead. So I'll scroll my map down so you can see. So you can see Gilead there on the mountain chain. You got Gad and you got Reuben. I gave them, so he's starting Gilead unto the valley, under the river of Arnon, half the valley, and the border unto the river Jabbok, which is the border of the children of Ammon. So he's described from north to south, and then he's given your eastern border with Ammon. And then 17, he gives you western border. The plain also, and Jordan, and the coast thereof, from Chinneroth, even unto the sea of the plain, even the salt sea. So this is why Gad has such a funky shape on these maps. So it's got this kind of dog leg going north, is from the Jordan River, and the plain going south, that was attributed to Gad as well. Cool? So that's what it's talking about there. So Chinneroth, the Sea of Galilee. The Salt Sea is referring to not the Red Sea, the Dead Sea. Yeah, this thing. Red Sea's much farther south. So the Jordan River flows, from the Sea of Galilee down and dumps into the Dead Sea without an outlet. All right. Under Ashdoth Pisgah eastward. All right. So verse 18, I commanded you at that time. All right, so he's addressing those three tribes right now. Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. He says, I talked to you at that time saying, the Lord your God hath given you this land to possess it. All right, they already had conquered. They had their land. The other tribes, they've still got a lot of work to do. He says, ye shall pass over armed before your brethren, the children of Israel, all that are meet for war. All right, everybody that's fit to fight, y'all aren't going to get to hop off this ship, their bandwagon, and just stay home and watch your brethren go fight. They all fought against your common enemies. You're coming with us. Your wives, your little ones, your cattle, I know that you have much cattle, shall abide in your cities which I have given you. This is part of the reason back in Numbers they were asking for this land of Bashan. So you got cattle farmers and you got great pasture land. Oh, we volunteer for this place, please. And so he's saying, you can leave your wives and your children and your cattle behind. We don't need them on a campaign march. But you've got to come. How long do you got to come? They can abide in your cities, which I've given you, until the Lord hath given rest unto your brethren. So you've got these walled cities, right? Bars and gates and very strong spot. You've got these 60 different cities where you can install your families and they can be safe while we're gone for quite a while. It's probably, multi-year campaign while they're left.
So did all the other brethren take their wives across?
Yeah.
So just those?
Just those who, this was your territory, you leave your stuff. Everyone else, y'all coming ahead. And they all camped at Gilgal. And that was where the families stayed while they had their campaigns north and south, south and north.
We thought they just left them all together.
It's a long time to be away from your spouses if that's not their home. All right, so until the Lord hath given rest unto your brethren. Not until we've got the victory. It's until the Lord has given rest unto your brethren, all right, to stop fighting. And until they also possess the land which the Lord your God hath given them beyond Jordan. So it talks about beyond Jordan. It's talking about the western side of it, crossing over. And then shall you return every man unto his possession which I have given you. All right? So that was the address to those 2.5 tribes. And then he's saying, I talked to Joshua. I commanded Joshua at that time, saying, Thine eyes have seen all that the Lord your God hath done unto these 2 kings. So shall the Lord do unto all the kingdoms whither thou passest. Ye shall not fear them, for the Lord your God, he shall fight for you. All right, what's the difference for Joshua in these 2 battles and the ones that are to come?
The Lord fight.
Well, hopefully that's not a difference. But the difference is Moses ain't going to be there. These 2, Moses was still alive and, in charge, even though Joshua had been tapped to be, the next leader. Moses has already received his sentence that you are not going over. And that's why Joshua was, charged and installed. And so this is an encouragement to Joshua. All right, you've seen the pattern. You've gone through this tribulation. You've borne through it patiently. Now you've got some experience, and now you can hope. Is it sounding familiar? Right? You can have greater hope and confidence that the Lord's going to continue to do what he said he was going to do. He's going to care for you. You don't have to be afraid of all the big, tall, scary guys on the other side. We've beaten the tall, big, scary guys in the big cities and things that are walled up to heaven. You don't have to fear him. The Lord, he shall fight for you. So you've got...
Did Moses know that he was not going in?
Yes, at this point, he did.
Before...
Before... No, he already knew before this. He knew at the very... within the last year of this journey, they had gone back to Kadesh Barnea and they'd started going around Edom. It was within that time that they'd run out of water, and you had the second incident with them murmuring against Moses, and he popped off. He popped off.
Until then, he didn't.
Until then, he had not been,
Oh, they knew they weren't going in.
Yeah, all that generation who had disobeyed.
But Moses still thought he was going to go in.
Yes, it hadn't a sentence hadn't been rendered until then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of get it. I was questioning about that.
Yeah, no problem. But that being said, he said, "All right, we've had this conquering. I've talked to Joshua, and then what did I do? I asked the Lord if I could go in." Right? He's praying the Lord would give him a reprieve, and so I besought the Lord. I'm begging, I'm asking at that time, saying, "O Lord God, thou hast begun to show thy servant thy greatness and thy mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven or in earth that can do according to thy works and according to thy might?" He says, you have just begun to show how you're going to use your power to conquer this land for your people. Who is like thee? He's praising him. He's not kissing up or being disrespectful. I pray thee, let me go over. Let me see it. And see the good land that is beyond Jordan, and that goodly mountain and Lebanon. Right? Let me go see. And the Lord said, no. Right? It says, but the Lord was wroth with me for your sakes. Right? This is not the first time Moses has used that expression. Telling the people that he's talking to is that the Lord was still angry with me, really starting from y'all's conduct, because they were murmuring and complaining and just really upset at Moses and Aaron for the lack of water at that time. And so the Lord was wroth. He would not hear me. And the Lord said unto me, all right, let it suffice thee. Let this be enough. Speak no more unto me of this matter. Don't bring it up again. Get thee to the top of Pisgah. All right, so you've got this cliff face on one of these mountains. Lift up thine eyes to the westward, to the northward, to the southward, and the eastward, and behold it all with thine eyes, for thou shalt not go over this Jordan. Right? So the answer to your question is no, don't ask again. What you will be permitted to do, you asked to see it, is yes, you can see it, but you're going to see it from over here. And we had looked at earlier in, I think, Deuteronomy 1 about he probably was given more than natural sight to be able to see all of it. Excuse me. And then he gets additional instructions from the Lord. He says, but charge Joshua. Charge him. So, give him clear instructions and encourage him and strengthen him. For he shall go over before the people. He's going to be the leader. And he shall cause them to inherit the land which thou shalt see. You're going to be able to see it, but you need to be imparting unto the next generation and Joshua, the next leader, because he's going to be the one that leads, not you, Moses. Says, so we abode in the valley over against Beth Peor, which is the house of Peor, one of the gods of Moab, and that'll show up again in the next chapter. Moses, as great and obedient as he was, and what a man of faith, even here you've got clear indication that even he couldn't keep the law. Right? And the Lord wasn't going to overlook it. So we covered a bunch of territory. Let's see if there's anything else. I'll make sure we have. The scale, Gilead, Machir. All right. Questions?
In verse 17, it was talking about the salt sea and under Ashdod, Pisgah. That's not the same Pisgah that Moses forgot.
So Pisgah is kind of a general word. You can have a Pisgah. It's like a cliff face. So you could have a cliff, there that's named Ashdod. You could have one Mount Nebo. It's probably all really close to each other for wherever they're camped and wherever he's going up. But I can't say definitively that that's the exact Pisgah that's referred to when he goes up, because he's going up, on this cliff face on, I think it's Mount Nebo is what it's also called, but it wouldn't be far off. Questions? Other questions? Got it figured out? We have a better feeling about where Bashan is? Yeah. How about Gilead? There you go. That gives you Gilead right there in the middle. So after they went up there to Andrea and conquered the north, all their cities, and they came back to where they were camping before, over here in these mountains. And then they're going to move down.
Sea of Sharon.
Chinnereth, yes, sir. That's the
Sea
Sea of Galilee, yes, sir. And down here, the Salt Sea is the Dead Sea. Yep.
When I was in college, our chorus sang a song, There is a Balm in Gilead.
There is a reference to that. It's one of the things, 114 times that Gilead is mentioned. And the question is there a balm in Gilead? Let's see. Well, maybe I didn't write the verse for that. I remember looking it up over the course of the day.
But now Gilead that put
Gideon.
Gilead is region, Gideon part.
Yeah. Yeah, but it just gets confusing when you're talking about Gileadites. Are we talking about the descendant of Gilead? Are we talking about the ones who live in the region? Are we talking about Gadites who live in the region? Or Manassites? Or even, funky boy Jair got his villages. So anyway, so that's Deuteronomy 3. Probably way more geographic information that you were looking for, but if we can, kind of build, even just a kind of a minor map in our head of just where are we at, then as we see references to these later in our scripture reading, you have kind of okay, we're over here. It helps make things easier, less likely to get off base.